Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about something that we all deal with. It impacts our lives. It can challenge our lives. It can hold us back from living a wonderful life. And it comes in all different forms. You may be dealing with it right now, might not even know it. I'm talking about grief. And we're going to dig into that today with an intuitive natural healer. She helps people find balance and move their lives forward in many different modalities, from the intuition to energy healing, Reiki, crystals, and so much more. Lena is back with us. Welcome. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm good. It's kind of funny. In the last day, I've like a bunch of different friends hanging out holiday. Lena is one of them. Heather was another one of them. And you're that person in one.
I am that person.
Yeah. So what we're dealing with
their names.
Yeah, it's weird. I got triggered, and her name is Lena. It's just a friend of a friend, and she was hanging out yesterday, and among other people. Today, this is not something that a lot of people want to talk about, and it can come in many different forms. A lot of times, when we say the word grief, it's about the passing of somebody. You're grieving. But It's not just that. It can be the loss of a relationship due to whatever circumstance. It could be the loss of a job. There's so much involved there where there's a grief process, but we're not really equipped to process it, right?
Right. It's difficult for many people to process grief. And really, when you talk about grief, what is grief? Grief is you have lost something, right? And so many times when we lose something or somebody, we feel like we have lost a piece of ourselves. And because of that, we begin to struggle with, the loss of whatever that is, whether it's a job, whether it's a lifestyle, whether it's a person, place, or even a thing, right? And we become so attached to these things that when we lose them, it literally just takes a piece of us with them, or multiple, maybe even.
I never looked at it that way, that a piece of you is gone or taken away by whatever you're grieving. Wow.
Because we all share DNA with things, right? So if you and I shake hands, we are sharing DNA with things. So when we hug somebody, when we get married to somebody, when we're attached to a job, we share our DNA with that. And then when we lose it, or if we leave it, we're like, oh my God, it's just like a piece of us is just gone. And so I always recommend to my clients, or to anyone that's listening today, if you have suffered a loss, come to a healer and let us cut you from those cords. Let me replace your DNA. Let me bring it back so that it no longer is separated from you. Does that make sense?
100%.
I'm a strong believer in energy work and cutting when somebody has died or when you lose a job, because I know what it did for me. The difference between my mom's death and my dad's death, like 200% different. The grief with my dad's death has been so much less, and the healing process with his death has been so much less than it was with my mother, because I was so connected to my mom that I couldn't let her go. And many times I'll be working with somebody and they're like, well, yeah, I lost that, but I'm over it. Well, you probably aren't really over it. You're just coping with it. And there's a difference.
Yeah.
Coping isn't healing. It just means that you're tolerating it, right? And it'll resurface at some point, and it surfaces in bad times. I mean, you may be sitting there talking to somebody and all of a sudden you're like, you get this overwhelming feeling and you start to cry and you're like, well, I thought I was over this, but I'm not. And that's because you really haven't processed it. You haven't finalized it. You haven't healed from it. All you've done is bury it and cope with it. And as we go through this process, I mean, in the last 60 days, I have had 6 or 7 people that I know that have died, and it's like, and for me, I'm like, wow, this is a lot. I mean, 6 or 7 people in 60 days, that's a lot of people to know that have passed away, and each one of those people, I've gone in and done cuts. I've gone in and I've done cuts on them so that I've cleared anything that I might have with them, so that I'm not holding on to them, or I'm not, you know, holding myself back, so that I can heal from whatever that trauma I might have, whether it's past life, whether it's just a friendship now, so that I get a better, clearer view of that, so that they can move forward and I can move forward.
Can we do those cuts ourselves, or at least in a basic way?
I believe people can. I believe that if they really are ready to release, and they're like, I let you go, I release you, I forgive you. There's so many people get so angry when somebody dies,
Yeah.
or if they lose a job, right? So that anger gets in the way. And because you're angry, that anger just doesn't allow you to process the cutting. And there are times where people can, and then something may trigger, and you're like, well, maybe I just need to go and have somebody help me, because there's something bigger or deeper inside of that.
Hmm. I My mom passed away 5 years ago, and I feel like I've come to terms with it. I don't feel like I'm grieving. I feel like my relationship with her, and it was fine then when she was alive, is stronger now.
Right.
I don't know. I can't even explain it. I'll ask for signs. I'll get them very
Mhm.
specific. Um, I'll think about her. I'll vibe her. It's as if she's still here, and in a good way, not like
Right.
I'm just trying to hold on. Um,
Right.
my dad passed away when I was 21. Wasn't really super close with him. It was sudden. It was a big surprise. I wonder if I've just buried that. I've never really confronted it because it was just then, and now, it's so far, in the past. And I bring that up because I wonder if a lot of us have fully moved on from a passing.
And don't get me wrong, it takes time to go through this loss process, right?
Sure.
And for some of us, it moves quicker than others, and depending on the relationship, it moves quicker than others. But my message to everybody today, and what my team wants me to talk about, is the fact that if you hold on to this grief and you don't let it go and you don't heal from it, excuse me, it can physically affect you. And
Hmm.
I am an example of that, because I believe that the breast cancer that I had, part of that stemmed from the grieving of my mother and not letting it go, right? She died of colon cancer. And within 5 years of her passing, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I, now knowing what I know now, I firmly believe that that grief that I was holding on to caused that issue for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was like, so it can affect you physically. And I see that all the time. I see people that are struggling with loss and grief, and it is physically taking a toll on them. And the message is, when your loved ones leave, and I mean, and this is the strong message that I am just getting today. So I'm just going to throw this out. When someone dies, they do not go to heaven, go to the next existence and go, well, I just can't wait for them to die, right? They don't want you to die. They want you to live your best life. They want you to know that they are with you, but they don't want you to just stop living because they're gone. And it's important to remember that. And really, honestly, I think that is our message for the day, which is, you just have to heal yourself and move forward. That's what your loved ones want. That's what your spirit team wants. They want you to move forward, meet your divine timing, and go forth and grow. Does that make sense?
Crystal clear. And your health issues, I've heard that before. And
Yes.
others, so similar situations, and it was over the loss of somebody else.
Hmm.
Like they're all like flying back in my mind. Somebody lost her husband and then had got breast cancer.
Yeah,
Um,
Mm-hmm.
in about the same time period, maybe 4 years. Uh, I believe, and I'm wondering your take on this, that maybe we can take comfort in knowing that when somebody passes, they're still here. Their
Yes.
energy, because of energy, their energy is still here. Many believe, I do, that we are spiritual beings in a human
Mm-hmm.
container. And the container goes like a car. Doesn't last forever.
I call the body the. Have you ever seen the movie Avatar?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
call bodies the I call them the avatar. I don't call them a body anymore. I'll tell you all the time, in my avatar, because that movie is a prime example of what really happens, right? So in that movie, film mimics real life. In that movie, they take somebody's soul and they basically put it into an avatar body, right? That's the basis of the movie. But Winona Judd, when her mom died, she at her funeral or memorial, she made the comment that we are all spiritual beings living a human experience. High truth, I'm about to cry. And that is so true, right? So I am totally blessed because I know that I have my mom, my dad, my grandma, my best friend. I know they're here. I know my spirit team is around me, right?
Yep.
But how many years did it take for me to learn that? Like about 54, right?
Yeah. And I don't, I got you. And I don't want to like kick myself in the butt over this, but I dealt with energy for 25 years. I've worked with psychics, all of that. I helped their careers. I never really got it. I
Hmm.
never really got it until like the last 3 years. I'm like, oh, that's how they can communicate with them. The
Uh-huh.
people that have passed over because their energy is still here. It never left. And,
Right.
I don't want people to think, well, this is just a cheesy excuse to make you feel better that your loved one is not here. Study energy and you'll see it. You'll
And
understand it.
and I get it. I get the whole thing of you can't see spirits, I can't hear spirits. I get that, right? Because I was like that for many years. I mean, let's face it, I grew up in a house that my mom was a medium, but we never knew that, right? I found it out about 5 years ago through a family friend who told me that. So really at the time frame that I was growing up, you didn't talk about that because if you told somebody you were seeing spirits, they were going to tell you were crazy and
Uh,
put you in a home, right?
yep.
But now it's becoming more common, and I think we discussed this before, where you have people like Teresa Caputo that have come out and said, this is reality. This is my reality. And she has been able to prove that reality by giving people information that substantiates what they know. Does that make sense? That they wouldn't know otherwise. And so what we are as psychic mediums, we are a way to relay messages to people or to help heal people that need this closure. Really, in a way, when I do a reading for somebody, I am helping them bring closure, right? So that they can help work through this grief process, so that we can help get them through this process so that they can move forward and
Mm,
live their best life, because ultimately
mm,
that's what your loved ones want, you know? And I tell people all the time, if something doesn't work out, if you suffer a loss in something, it's a lesson learned. Let's clear it. Let's work through it. Let's let it go. Let's release it so that you can move forward. I worked for the Arizona Department of Corrections for 27 years. That was my life. That was me. That was who I was. And it took some work because I grieved when I left. It was hard for me to leave. I was attached to that place. But now that I've done the work, that I've released, I realized that was just a portion in my life. And now I can move forward to what I'm doing now, which is to help others move the same way. Right. And
hmm
so because of that, I find that I feel better. I feel better about myself. So feel better about myself. Say that 3 times fast. So it's like at this point in my life, I just want other people to understand that let's work through this. Let's get you through it and move forward without having guilt. I work with a lot of people that have guilt about moving forward or, making
Mm.
changes because this person isn't here anymore, right? I work with ladies that have had miscarriages, and a lot of them struggle with the loss of the child and the child not being here. And they feel responsible and they feel like they can't live their life because the child isn't here living their life. But that's not the case. That isn't what the child would want for you. Does that make sense?
Completely. And the guilt thing, I'm glad you brought it up because when somebody passes, we have guilt in terms
Mm-hmm.
of moving our lives forward. Let's say somebody loses a spouse, whether it's sudden or, if you knew it was coming, you feel guilty, year two, three, four, whatever, in being with somebody else or even enjoying the company of somebody else.
Or just being here still, right?
And then there's
Just
that.
still being here. I mean, there's a lot of people who just cannot, their whole life was so focused on their spouse that when that spouse dies, that they just cannot move forward. And it's
Yeah.
important to know that they want you to move forward. I mean, I'll give you an example, and I think I may have told this story before about my dad. So when my mom died, my mom here physically, before she passed, was like, "You will not bury me in Winslow, Arizona. You will bury me in Mesa." Well, Mesa, if you know anything about Arizona at all, Mesa is like 3 hours from Winslow. Okay. Well, when my mom died, my dad's like, "I'm burying her in Winslow." And I was like, "Dad, are you sure?" Because mom was adamant about being buried in Mesa. And he was like, "Nope, we talked about it and I'm doing it." But messages I was receiving was he didn't have my mother's approval, right? But on the flip side of that, his grief from the loss of my mom, his dad, and his mom was so great that he literally just shut his mind off. He literally just closed it off because he didn't want to remember. He didn't want to think about them, anything like that. Right. So it literally caused dementia for him. And he struggled with dementia starting about the time my mom died until he died in 21. So you're talking from '08 to 21, he struggled through this, right?
Mm.
Well, when we finally went in and did the healing work on him to open up that channel for him again, that night my mom came to him and was like, "I'm not mad at you for burying me in Winslow," because once she died, she didn't care. But he internalized that guilt and literally just fed off of that until he died until she came to him and said, "I don't care that you buried me in Winslow. I'm not mad at you for burying me in Winslow. It's time for you to, it's time for you to come home. It's time for you to come with us." And how many times do we do that? And that's a prime, full body chills. That's a prime example of how somebody just holds on to stuff and it just makes them physically ill.
Yeah.
It affects them emotionally, right? And I tell people all the time, you know what? Once they die, the people don't care. They don't care. We put we put stipulations on people when we're alive, and when we die, we're like, "Well, I don't know why I just did that because I don't really care about that anymore." And what a struggle it would have been, right? Um, and so people need to understand that if you have questions, go see a medium. Let us answer those questions for you. Let's get you some closure in that area, get your questions answered so that you are able to move forward and live your best life, which is what we're here to do.
Do you think it would be helpful for people if they lost somebody to ask for some insight from the person that passed, the loved one? Send me a sign, send me a specific sign, give me something that, answers a question. Where do you
Yes.
want to be buried? Were you okay with the choice that I made? Whatever it might be. But to get it, I feel that we don't do that. We're afraid to, or we just
But you
don't
know what?
believe.
I'm going to tell you, when I do readings, even when I do work on people, usually when I'm doing work on people, they have spirit guides or family around them, right? And I tell them all the time, They are trying to communicate with you. They are trying to send you messages, but you aren't listening to
Yes.
them, or you're not seeing them, right? People will come in and say, I just have the weirdest freaking dreams. And I'm like, they're trying to communicate with you because you're not listening when you're consciously awake. So they are trying to get these messages to you through the dream. So start logging your dreams. When you wake up, log that dream and then break it down and figure out what they're trying to tell you. Many times when somebody is grieving, they are unable to pick up on these messages.
Yep.
And because they're still connected, they are still connected to the person, which is why the cord cutting is so imperative, because you need to cut those cords and disconnect so that you can see, you can feel. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, where after I do a cutting, they can feel them, they can hear them, they start picking up the signs. And if they don't, that means there's either more work that they need to do on themselves, or they just aren't ready to hear it, right? Because when I do the work, we do the work, we witness it, but you have to be able to accept it. So if you haven't accepted it, then you need to allow it to work and let it come into effect. And you know, and people don't want to let them go. Well, I'm going to lose them, or I'm afraid they're going to go away. And it's like, and that was me. When Dawn Marie went to cut me from my mom, I'm like, oh my God, I'll lose her. And Dawn Marie's like, yeah, you're not going to lose her.
Yep.
Trust me, she's not going anywhere.
It's so true.
But that was mine. I'm going to lose my mom if I don't stay connected to her and hold on to her. Well, in actuality, I have better relationship her when I'm not cut, now that I'm cut, since before I was cut.
Yep.
Because now I can actually see her, hear her, and talk to her better.
Because the blocks are all gone. They even say in feng shui that you should not keep the ashes in an urn of a loved one in your home. And I know that sounds like, well, wait, they're on the mantle. I want to honor them. But that's what comes through in feng shui. They said it's not something you should be doing.
I personally would not do it. I personally, if I have to cremate somebody, I'm going to put them in the ground in a cemetery. That is my own personal thing. And I know that feng shui says the same thing. I do know that there are some people who just have to have that person right there, that they're not ready to release it yet. And that's a way of holding on. Honestly, in my opinion,
Agreed.
that's a way of holding on to them. And that's what they need. That's what this person needs right now. And at the point that they're able to say, okay, I'm ready to move these down off the mantle, put them in the backyard, whatever. Funerals are closures for family. Funerals aren't for the dead, they're for the living, right? And so it's a way for you to close. Really, honestly, for me, putting them in the ground, getting a headstone, that's closure. That's it. There, it's time to move on and move forward.
I do marketing for funeral homes, quite a few of them. And in one, we've changed the way it looks. And their, call it their slogan, or what they ride on now is celebrate the memories. It's not, you're there to reflect back on somebody, not sadness, and say goodbye. We're not saying goodbye because they're still here. We have to say goodbye. We're out of time. like that's like, it goes too fast.
It does. What?
The cord cutting, how long does that take? Final question. Got a couple of seconds here on average.
You know what? I can do it as long as it's just basic. There's not a lot of belief work. We can do it in 30 minutes, in a 30-minute session. If you want to go a little deeper and get a reading along with it, we can move it. We can push it to an hour, right?
Sure.
Yeah, but absolutely. You know what? Let's release this grief and get moving forward.
100%. Well said. That's what it's all about. Moving your life forward, not forgetting. They're always going to be there, and
Always.
And it's interesting. You in your work were afraid that you would lose the connection to your mom by cutting the cords. And it was just the opposite. It cleared away the clutter, let's call it that, but loosely said, so that you could feel the presence of your mom even though she's not here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely.
How do we help somebody? How do they find you?
So you can find me at you can email me at contact@heatherlena.com. My website, heatherlena.com, or on Facebook and Instagram under Healings with Heather.
Yep. Simple to find, Heather and Lena, LENA.com. Wonderful talking with you. Not a fun topic, grieving, but
No.
it can be positive if you look at it in the right way, as you should.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Awesome talking with you. Have a great weekend, and we'll catch up soon.
All right. See you next week, Steve. Thanks.
Thanks. We'll be right
Bye.
back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.